She has been there covering all the events unfolding there. Let's go live there to Cairo and see what Jihan has to tell us now. Okay, looks like we need some time for that contact to be established, looks like it. Okay, we'll try and establish that contact later on. Now, moving on with the news, protests against unpopular rulers in some Arab countries continue as the revolt in Egypt picks up steam. Here's more on that story.
The Egyptian uprising is continuing to offer hope to and inspire people in other parts of the Arab world. Some analysts say the Tunisian revolution has set off a domino effect that has reached Egypt, and that it will not stop before penetrating other Arab nations.
People have spoken very loud and clear. I mean, any normal person would be getting the message. And this message is not only for President Hosni Mubarak, but also other Mubaraks in the region.
There are early signs of popular movements rising up in Yemen and Jordan as well. In all these countries, people are angry with what they call entrenched corruption and poor governance of the authorities.
What is also interesting is that the economic demands being made by young people all over the Mediterranean region and Western Europe and the United States are broadly similar. There are more educated population, large numbers of graduates unemployed, large numbers of school leavers seeing little hope or prospect, and even in Britain youth unemployment is now 20% and in the inner city areas much higher.
The US government under former President George W. Bush wanted to make fundamental changes in the geopolitics of the Middle East region under a scenario it called the New Middle East Plan. However, the project failed, and popular uprising has instead already toppled one regime, that of Western-backed former President Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali in Tunisia. Popular discontent is threatening other Arab rulers, typified by their autocratic rule and subservience to the West. As for the embattled Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, only time will tell how long he can hang on, as more and more of his own people inside and outside Egypt are joining in the chorus for him to step down.
Okay, we have managed to establish a contact with a journalist, jihan+hafez. She's there in Cairo, the Egyptian capital, witnessing closely for press+tv all the developments unfolding there. Jihan, this is the 7th day of the protests over there in Egypt. Why don't you start telling us about the situation on the ground there, especially around tahrir+square?
Sure. Well, this day began for me. We hit the streets early in the morning, and the one thing that everyone knew about the 7th consecutive day of the uprising was the fact that the police would return to the streets after fleeing the scene here in Tahrir+square on Friday, January 28th. Now, the interesting thing about the police is the protesters are still confronting them. They're still, in some areas, attacking them because they have this animosity towards them from what happened January 28th and the systematic torture that's been here in this country. Our car, in fact, as we were driving to Shubra, an industrial district here in Cairo, was stopped, and they tried to confiscate our camera. It was a looting that actually saved us from them taking away our camera and deporting us back to, or sending us back to our hotel. Despite this, however, there was a massive demonstration in Shubra, which is a stronghold of the Muslim Brotherhood. The interesting thing about Shubra is there's 5 million people there, both Christian and Muslim. A majority of them support the Muslim Brotherhood. The demonstration started out as 100. It quickly turned into thousands and thousands of people. All of them converged on Tahrir+square. There was a relative of the late President Anwar Sadat who addressed the people today in that square, and you saw different pockets of demonstrations happening within the square. So you had women protesting, you had young people protesting, you had unemployed men, all of them marching in different areas of the circle, but nonetheless, another breakdown of society marking the 7th consecutive day. People were climbing buildings, banner dropping. They've been flying a lot of flags very high above these buildings. Just behind me is the museum, and beyond that, you can see the tens of thousands of people who remain there. Another interesting development, a lot of the different stores, the shops that are still open, meaning the food stores, are giving out free food now to the people who are inside of Tahrir+square. A lot of mothers are bringing blankets, are bringing tents, are bringing pillows to keep people there as long as possible. There's also been a concise plan for where these protesters are going. But as of now, the city is still in breakdown mode. Things are still on fire here in the country, and people are looking forward to a bigger day, tomorrow in fact, a demonstration of 1 million people that April 6th movement has called for tomorrow.
Okay, Jihan, people have been carrying placards and, we've seen banners in the video that emerges from Tahrir+square and elsewhere in Egypt, Alexandria, and Suez, whatever the protests are. Could you tell us about those slogans and the banners people are carrying? What do they say? Some of them are in English, we can read, some of them are in Arabic.
So, sure. Well, a lot of them say, game over America, we're not going to take Obama anymore. The American influence in this regime has really come to light for the Egyptian people, and most of the banners, as we saw in Tunisia, a lot of the signs and the banners they were holding were in French, to direct to the French government, which influences Tunisia. They will take it no more, meaning no more influence, no more hegemony over the region. Here in Tahrir, you see a lot of slogans directed toward the American government, directed toward the Israeli government, because people here are very aware that both Israel and the United States have come out, and it has not been strongly against Mubarak, given the fact that Mubarak, of course, is a very strong ally of both Israel and the United States. But other than that, their banners and their slogans of change, of what they want, and a lot of them also have the 7 slogans of change, that being reforming the Constitution to remove Article 76 and Article 82, which President Hosni Mubarak enforced, and it pretty much said only the president decides, or only the parliament decides who will be able to run for president. They want a complete cancellation of the parliament, because in this previous election in November, a lot of people say it was hands down stolen by the Hizb al-Watani, the National Democratic Party, which is Mubarak's party. And people also in the square right now are not responding whatsoever to the fact that there's been some reshuffling of the Mubarak regime, meaning they take one cabinet member here, make a minister there, one minister, make him cabinet member. This means nothing to the people. When they say we want no Mubarak, they mean they want no one from his regime who's been involved in the past 30 years of what they're calling the theft of this country.
Okay, Jihan, we also know, you also mentioned the support that the U.S. is lending to the Mubarak regime, as well as support that Israel is actually placing there. How did Egyptian people on the street feel toward this U.S. support? Yesterday, I saw some of them carrying some parts of the remnants of and parts of the weapons and also bullets, and they were showing to cameras, and they were made in the U.S. How do they feel about this?
Well, they're very disturbed, and they're disgusted in many senses. I was shot at myself by a tear gas canister that said made in the United States, and these tear gas canisters were choking people literally halfway to death on the street. People couldn't breathe. They were using them in excessive force. A lot of the people in Tahrir+square, prior to being shot at by these weapons, knew nothing about the $1.3 billion to $2 billion that comes here to Egypt. But now people are very aware of the close connections that the American government has. So now they understand the contradiction between democracy. You have Shimon Peres, the Prime Minister, the Israeli president, saying, well, if radicals come to power, it does not override democratic reforms. And the people here cannot believe that they would side with democracy over sovereignty, human rights, and the right for people to decide and what they choose. So people here are very turned off by the United States. In fact, I've been working with a number of American journalists. They now can't say that they're from America because people become hostile here. They say, well, take back your weapons. Tell your president we don't want him to keep killing our people. The bullets as well that have been killing people, those are also financed by the United States. And also the fact that the U.S. says the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, is going to create a radical regime here that's going to be hostile throughout the country, also upsets them, because the Ikhwan, I would argue, is the strongest opposition group in this country. In fact, if they didn't move in support of this protest, you would not see these masses on the street. Because a lot of the people in this country, whether they come from whatever society, middle class, well, whatever middle class is left, lower, the middle income, or the or upper class, a lot of them do support the Muslim Brotherhood. So for the Americans to propagate, along with the Israelis, that if Mubarak leaves, the Brotherhood will take over and create a Sharia law situation, or propagate in that direction, is really not sitting well with a lot of these people, because still it's the United States and it's Israel trying to dictate to Egyptian people how they should live their lives. And this is something that is synonymous with American hegemony in this region. And a lot of people in this country, the most populated country in the Middle East, are very aware that their country, Egypt, is important strategically and geopolitically to the United States because of where it's located and how much influence it will have on Israel and the Palestinians, and especially in Gaza.
Okay, Jihan, I got one last question. We're running out of time. If you could tell me briefly, security-wise, I mean, yesterday we had this news of snipers shooting from nowhere, and then some people getting hurt, and then the looting was also in question. What's the security situation like today? Police is also back on the streets. They have been absent since Friday. What is the security like over there right now?
It's still very chaotic. In fact, there are assumptions here that that there could be some scuffles. The police have also people they call hired thugs working for them. So they are literally stopping people. As I mentioned, they stopped us. The police stopped us today. But
Right.
if you're caught inside of a demonstration, they will not attack them. On top of that, the helicopters are still flying overboard. I can't leave this building when I finish talking to you right now because they've enforced a no movement zone over the media area. So security is still on high alert. And as I said, there has been a breakdown in society, and chaos is still playing out here in the capital city of Egypt.
Okay, thanks for that update. Jihan+hafez joining us live from Cairo. Now, Israel's Knesset has called for a probe into the failure of intelligence services to foresee the uprising in Egypt. This amid massive public protests to oust the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Earlier, Israeli Army Intelligence Chief Aviv Kochavi had claimed that Mubarak's government would not be under threat. Tel Aviv is also concerned about the fate of a man imprisoned in Cairo on charges of spying for Israel. Many prisoners have fled or been killed while attempting to escape amid the chaos across Egypt. Meanwhile, Israel, the United States, and Britain have reacted to the uprising in Egypt. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has issued a directive to its embassies in the U.S., China, Russia, Canada, and several European countries to garner support for Mubarak. This as the U.S. President Barack Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have both demanded an orderly transition to a more politically open Egypt. But they have both stopped short of urging President Mubarak to heed the protesters' call and resign. Meanwhile, British Premier David Cameron has warned Mubarak against the repressive response to the uprising, saying it would end badly for the world. Cameron says he had conveyed the message to Mubarak in a telephone call after consulting with President Obama. Oil prices have risen to just